Le chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Another quote in a recorded conversation. So she too has stated one thing here and the opposite there. Similarly, with the ArriveCan $54 million scandal, we see the government saying things that contradict the facts. They released a document to the House of Commons saying that ThinkOn Inc. had received a $1.2 million contract for experimentation of mobile QR scanning. Yet the CEO said yesterday he never got any money. In fact, they don't even work in the field. So if his company didn't get the money, who did?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Matters. Obviously, the government ensures that contracts are handed to the highest standards. There are questions about this contract that are being looked at. Certainly, we want to make sure there are answers. But I will say, Madam Speaker, that what we did when the country was in a situation of crisis, when the opposition was calling for the border to be closed, is ensure that we brought forward an app that allowed the movement of people safely during that crisis. And that is something that worked and was extremely effective, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Making somebody rich. We just don't yet know who. So the government released a document in the House of Commons saying that ThinkOn Inc. got $1.2 million in ArriveCan contracts. Yesterday, the CEO said, we have received no money from the CBSA. He further said, we're not even remotely in that space. In other words, they don't even do the work that was paid for. So this company did not get the $1.2 million. Two questions. Who did get the money, and where is it now?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, CBSA is looking into this matter. They're aware of concerns with respect to the contract. I can assure the honourable member opposite that in all matters with respect to contracts that we adhere to the absolute highest standards and demand those standards in every interaction that the government interacts in. But again, I will point out, Madam Speaker, the imperative nature of the action that the ArriveCan app was able to facilitate. We were in a situation where the opposition was calling for the border to be closed. We wanted to make sure that Canadians could travel safely. We introduced an app that facilitated that in a time of crisis and made sure that Canadians could travel.
Yesterday, the Globe and Mail revealed that the Liberals are claiming millions in payments to vendors for their ArriveCan boondoggle that never actually happened. A $54 million app with millions unaccounted for. Canadians are left wondering if there are more fake ArriveCan payments listed. First, it was ThinkOn Inc. Then later in the day, Ernst Young came forward to say this government is claiming false billing. So, does the minister, do these Liberals want to revise the figures that they signed off on?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, I answered this earlier. I'm happy to again. The CBSA is taking a look at the contract. They're aware that there are questions. The Government of Canada and this government in all contracts conducts itself to the highest standard and demands the highest standards in every contract that it enters into. But with respect to the ArriveCan app, I would point out that the members opposite wanted to close the border, didn't support the app, and frankly were not helpful during that period of time and constantly changing their positions. We ensured that people were able to enter the country and that goods and services were able to flow in a time of crisis. Madam Speaker, will continue to be there for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
What Canadians don't find helpful is that these Liberals have no intention of telling the truth. So here are some facts for them. They said the app would cost $80,000. It ended up costing $54 million. Then CBSA and these Liberals, these ministers, signed off on payments, saying that companies like ThinkOn and companies like Ernst Young receive payments from the government. These companies never received a dime. So money is missing. We have two questions for these Liberals. Who's lying and who got rich?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, here are the facts. During an unprecedented time when the country was being rocked by COVID, and we needed to be able to make sure that people, and they're saying it doesn't matter, it absolutely does matter, that people were able to cross the border, that we were able on an urgent basis to create a system that kept them safe and ensured that they were able to continue to have mobility. In every step of the pandemic, whether or not it's in supports or whether or not it's in mobility, we were there for Canadians. As crises occur, our government will respond and will always do so to the highest standard.
L'honorable député de Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier.
Madame la Présidente, agir urgemment.
Madam Speaker, acting urgently doesn't mean recklessly spending taxpayers' money. This government has gotten us used to doubting its integrity. After the ventilators of a former Liberal MP and the land at Roxham Road, it's the ArriveCan app which cost $54 million. Experts say they could have done it for $250,000. We're being laughed at. Even worse, the government gave $1.2 million to a business which says it did not receive any money. A simple question: who did this government give the $1.2 million to? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House. As I've already explained, the agency responsible for the contract understands full well that there are questions. In every situation, we will make sure that the government acts responsibly. We will answer questions and offer the oversight our system requires.
Honorable député de Lévis.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lobinière.
La Présidente, l'application.
Madam Speaker, ArriveCan cost a fortune to Canadians, and it certainly does not work on the level of a $50 million that it cost. A good programmer could easily have done it for less than $250,000. Liberal incompetence cost $50 million again. Why is this Liberal government accumulating scandal after scandal? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madame la Présidente, le député dans l'autre côté.
Madam Speaker, the member on the other side asked a question in an interesting way, and I will answer directly that this situation was extremely difficult for our country. And it's not just a matter of the cost of the software. It was a matter of building an application around the software, which was very important. It was essential at that time for the government to act quickly and effectively. And that's what we did.
News broke this afternoon that one of the companies that this government says they gave $1.2 million to for their ArriveCan boondoggle, well, that company says that they didn't get a dime. So, where's the $1.2 million? Who got rich?
The Honourable Minister, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, throughout the pandemic, keeping Canadians safe has always been our top priority, and that was why we used the ArriveCan app. CBSA is aware of concerns surrounding contracts, and they're looking into the matter further. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
CBSA is concerned. Canadians are concerned because this Prime Minister's scandal-plagued record speaks for itself. This was an app that started out, it was supposed to cost $80,000, and the expenses ballooned to more than $54 million. It wrongly quarantined, forcing people into house arrest. 10,000 Canadians wrongly. It's a boondoggle. It's a failed app. They've lost $1.2 million. Who got rich?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you know, I wish the party opposite would go back in time to a time when they were calling on us to close borders. We brought in the ArriveCan app to keep Canadians safe, and it worked. It's no longer mandatory. And Mr. Speaker, as I said...
I'm just going to interrupt for a moment. I'm having a hard time hearing the Parliamentary Secretary, and I'm sure the Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes would like to hear what she has to say. So I'm going to ask everyone to just take it down a notch and maybe just take a deep breath. And now we'll listen to the Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oh, it's starting again across the way. And I guess they just don't want to remember what it was like a year or two ago when Canadians were living with COVID and the Conservatives were calling on us to close the border, to stop letting people come in. We brought in the ArriveCan app to keep Canadians safe, and it worked, Mr. Speaker. As I said previously, CBSA is aware of issues with the contract, and they're looking into it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Niagara Falls.
Speaker, the Liberals' continued use of the ArriveCan app destroyed any chance of recovery this summer for our Canadian tourism sector. Canadians are struggling, yet they deserve so much better. So they can be excused for being upset when this government committed $54 million to the disastrous ArriveCan app. Canadians simply want to know two things, Mr. Speaker. Who got rich at their expense, and when will you scrap this app?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ArriveCan app is no longer mandatory. Perhaps the honourable member has not been watching the news to know that, but I want to assure Canadians that it's still available for those who wish to use it. We brought in the ArriveCan app along with many other measures that we did during the pandemic because we were always putting Canadians' health and safety as our #1 priority. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, we heard some responses from the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety, but we didn't get an answer. So it's very clear. They said the app was going to cost $80,000, and then they said they gave this company $1.2 million of a total of $54 million on this boondoggle, and the company that they say that they gave $1.2 million to said that they weren't given a dime. So we asked who got rich. They don't know the answer. Here's a new question for them. Who is lying?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the honourable member is not accusing me of lying in this House. Mr. Speaker, it's really hard to answer the question when I can't even hear myself think, Mr. Speaker. I've answered this question now 4 times, and for the opposition to call the ArriveCan app a boondoggle when it was developed to keep Canadians safe is appalling. CBSA is aware of issues with the contract, and they're looking.
I'm just going to interrupt the Parliamentary Secretary for a second. I'm going to ask her to maybe give us the answer from the top again, because it was hard for me. But wait. I'm just going to share a little story. Last night I was at a reception across the hall, and there were some people who were in the gallery, and they were looking down and they were identifying individuals who were screaming and shouting, and they were embarrassed for the individuals. I just want you to think of that when you're sitting in your seat, thinking that you're alone. You're not alone. You're either on camera or someone is watching. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, I'll let her start from the top to give an answer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Throughout the pandemic, our #1 priority was the health and safety of Canadians. And the ArriveCan app was part of the response to that. As I have said numerous times in this House, CBSA is aware of issues with the contract, and they're looking into them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.